This is WRWK 93.9, Midlothian, Virginia. And it is time for the Hollee Freeman Show, also known as So Good, So Good. And today's special guest, well, I'll let her fill the story for you. Take it away, Hollee.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ron. We are here with the next episode of So Good, Soul Good Stories. I'm here with my friend Letisha Brooks. Oh, Letisha.
It's Letisha.
Letisha.
Yeah.
Did I just say Tish?
I know.
Tish, but when you...
I actually prefer
Tish.
or Tisha.
Yeah.
Because most people say Letisha.
Letisha, because when you see it,
It looks like Letisha, but it's Letisha.
Letisha.
And it's different story behind that, but I'll let you know.
So I'm trying to be all formal, but I just call you Tish.
Tish
So.
is fine.
So the idea of the So Good, Soul Good stories is that I connect with people who are using their passions in their lives. And the way that it came about was that I was realizing that I was just working all the time and really not doing things. I mean, I liked working, but I wasn't doing things that really like spoke to my soul.
Right.
And so I started to interview lots of women about like what speaks to your soul. And there was one lady who was telling me all the things about that what she's doing in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end, she was like, "But I really love baking." And I was like, and then her whole face changed, like everything changed. And I was like, "So do you bake?" And she was like, "I don't have time to bake." And so I just kind of got into the habit of asking women, like, what do you do to feed your soul that's just for you and not for anybody else?
Yeah.
And so that's how this whole So Good, Soul Good came apart.
That's so nice.
And you are a dog trainer.
I am.
Extraordinaire.
Thank you. Thank you.
Train my own dogs, and part of training dogs is training people.
It is
So
a big part.
We're gonna get into that part too.
For sure.
So just to start, just thank you for being here on the show. I know that Ron's gonna put up all your information on Facebook, and this is on the radio, so people will be able to contact you for more information. But just kind of give us a sense of kind of who you are. Yeah, just like who you are, and then we'll talk about.
Sure. So I am Letisha Brooks, or Tish, or Tisha, as people are comfortable calling me. It's fine. So I mean, it's interesting you say that about like what's your passion, because my passion has always been animals, but I didn't really understand that as a kid, right? And my mom used to say that, you know, I could always talk to horses, or I could talk to the hamsters, or whatever animal was kind of around. I grew up in a household with Doberman pinschers. So we grew up, at one time, we had 4 Dobermans in our household, and I was about 13 at that time. But I've counted over my childhood of us having over 17 throughout our life. And so, yeah, I started really young. Again, this is one of those things where it was like, it just kind of fell into place. We moved up to Virginia when I was about 14, and I didn't have any friends. And so at that time,
you had animals.
I had animals. And also, we transitioned from moving from a suburban area to a very rural area. So I was no longer used to being able to like walk around and see my friends. So my mom would initially sign me up at, you know, the library, and they had like snake adventure day, reptiles, and then she went to her veterinarian one day and was like, and we lived about 45 miles away from the vet. And so she was like, "Hey, you know, my daughter's really interested, loves dogs. She's a great person. She's grown up with horses." And he allowed me to come in and volunteer. And so what most people think of as a volunteer is not what happened.
Like cleaning all the cages. And
most people think of a volunteer as like, oh, you get to like cuddle the animals and do all that.
Like I'm cleaning cages.
14 happily cleaning kennels, happily cleaning cages for the foster kittens. But at that time, the veterinarian there saw my passion, and he allowed me to watch him perform surgery.
Oh,
so
wow!
I was 14, and I was watching him and actually assisting him at the time on surgeries. And one of the ones that I can vividly remember. It was a foreign body of a dachshund, a miniature dachshund or dachshund, and he had eaten a corn cob. And so, you know, he had all the issues going on with that. And so I got to watch that. He survived. but that I think really just sparked something
Oh,
different in
wow.
me, and I didn't realize it. And then when I was 19, my mom and I actually applied for the same job at the emergency vet office. And she got it, and I did not,
Oh
based
my
on her
gosh.
experience.
Yeah.
And so she went back to the manager and she goes, I appreciate this opportunity, but I would really love this for my daughter. So they gave the position to me instead of my mom. And so that is where I started really working in veterinary medicine.
Wow.
And it was in the emergency center. And so when you think of emergency room, they have that exact same thing for dogs. They have the
Really?
ICU, they have the IV fluids, they have nurses on rotating shifts, they
Wow.
have chemotherapy, they have internal medicine, ultrasound, like everything you can think happens in the human
Oh my
side of
gosh.
medicine happens in.
I wouldn't even thought that, but
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense.
and it does, and it's really intense.
Oh, wow.
So I really enjoyed doing that for the time that I was doing it. And I learned so much. I learned so much about dog behavior and cat behavior. We primarily did dogs and cats is what we saw. But what I learned in as far as dog behavior is that dog psychology is different, and dogs that are ill or sick present differently than a healthy dog. And so you take a lot of extra caution and care with those dogs because they can't always vocalize how they feel. And some dogs just have such a high pain tolerance level that they don't vocalize how they feel. But so we saw a variety of different things happening there. And I enjoyed it. I did that for about 7 years. And then I did small animal veterinary medicine also. And then I would say our family started to grow, and my husband was a dog trainer, self-employed as a dog trainer as well, and he had a case overload, so he was having more work.
Like, so who do I know that can help me do all
He
this?
had more work than he was able to complete. And initially, I started just kind of being on the clerical side, administrative work, kind of organizing his schedule and such. And then it got to the point where it's like, okay, well, we need you out in the field too. So then I was starting to train. I spent a whole summer or two shadowing him, helping him as his assistant, and then it just kind of continued to bridge on over to working with dogs, and it just became a different passion from going from veterinary medicine to not just training but also recognizing the emotional state of dogs and their well-being overall. There were a lot of dogs that I would encounter that had a lot of fear-based reactivity. They might have had some level of trauma in the past, or it's just families didn't know what to do with their dog, and they just kind of left them at bay and kind of let them figure it out.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of micromanaging with the dogs. So yeah, I get to do it every day, and I remind myself I get to do it every day, because I think so many times people take for granted what they're able and capable of doing. And so it is just a great thing when people contact me and seek me out for help and assistance. So I have been training professionally for over 15 years or so. And I can tell you the first dog I trained. I can tell you.
Oh my gosh.
I can tell you.
We definitely want to hear it.
Yeah. So the first dog I actually trained was a Skipper Key, which is
Never heard of
it. Looks like a small black Spitz type of dog. And this dog was actually part of. He was actually one of my former employer's dogs. So I also worked at a dog boarding facility, kennel, and I was a kennel manager. And so she actually brought her dog to me because he was having like some reactivity and he was biting and nipping at people. And so she was just like, here, just, see what you can do. And it worked out great. And so she had a great life with that dog. And then from that, she actually asked me to launch a training program at her facility.
Oh, wow.
So I started a training program at her facility. And then the next dogs I trained was a dachshund named Dash. I trained a husky named Henry, and her other dog named Romy. And it just kept going on. And every dog has their story. And I look at every dog and I hold it dear to me, because not only am I teaching dogs actually teach me so much about myself and actually more about them. if we are quiet long enough and we don't over communicate to the dogs, we can recognize and see what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's a neat connection between veterinary medicine and training, because I wouldn't. So that was illuminating to me, because typically I would think like, oh, the vet is like the veterinary medicine person, and like the dog trainer is the dog trainer person. But to have both of those skill sets is really nice, because it like they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Like if you understand dog biology, you're better able to train them. If you understand how to train them, you better understand dog biology. So that's neat.
Yeah, they usually don't intersect like that. So it was a very unique
that's
situation
cool.
where they happened to intersect for me. And a lot of the vets that I used to work with in the past, I still have a close relationship with, and I love that's kind of carried on.
That's so cool. The other thing I want to say is the whole Doberman thing.
Yeah.
So look at her. She's all like cute and mild mannered. And then you see her with these like Dobermans with the ears.
Yeah.
And if you go to Tish's Facebook page or see it, you do some lives.
Yeah.
The dogs are like running around. You're like sitting in the grass, and they're just so nice and calm. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that Dobermans are one of the breeds that people are afraid of.
Yeah, it is. They are. There's a handful of dogs on what are classified as dangerous dog breeds, and Dobermans, unfortunately, as many dogs are classified as that. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, we look at the purpose of the breed, and Dobermans were actually the only breed bred specifically to protect an individual.
Really?
So they are the only breed that are bred specifically for that purpose. A lot of times people will think that it's like a German Shepherd, and German Shepherds are actually herding breeds that are intelligent enough that they can do other type of work. So yeah, and I think also like in the 80s, there was like there was a movie called The Doberman Gang that came out in the 80s. And so there was a lot of stigma around the breed. And so growing up with them, my dad was in the military, and he felt like a Doberman could protect his family while he was away from home. And so that's where we started at with getting a Doberman.
That makes sense.
And it did. I mean, he did. Our Doberman did definitely do that while we were away. And I will say that they are great at assessing a situation, right? So I just love them. But they're also super cuddly.
Yours are so cuddly and cute. They're just like hopping through the field.
What in the world? Yeah, I tell everybody they are like a mush. They like
they're all like leaning up on you.
Yeah, they roll around. I mean, they don't realize that they're a big dog, right?
Yeah,
they think they're a little dog trapped in a big dog's body, and so they try to like do all the little dog things, like let me lay on you, let me jump on you. And so I have this picture posted up of my Doberman Shaka laying on my lap. And that's his favorite thing to do. He doesn't care that he's 75 pounds, and he doesn't care that his nails are tough, right? But that's what makes him super happy. And I don't always do it because of his size.
Yeah.
But when he does it, he'll just take his head and clonk me in the head, because he just is trying to roll into my arms.
I wonder why police officers and such don't use like Dobermans. Like, why do they choose German Shepherds? I mean, I don't even know if you know that.
It came down to the health of the breed. And so because they became so popularized, their health declined from overbreeding and poor breeding practices. And so we've started to see Dobermans with a higher prevalence of what's called dilated cardiomyopathy, which is a condition where the heart starts to enlarge as the dog gets older. And sometimes it happens in young dogs. And then we also see like the hip dysplasia.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there were I don't think people realize that when dogs are bred or created, that genetics play a major role.
Yeah.
And so if you have anxiety, passes through genetics and everything like that. So yeah, you don't really see it too often than it used to, but there are definitely some people in different organizations that try to bring back like the true characteristics of the breed.
We're definitely going to get to the anxiety, and there were a couple of questions about that too.
Yeah.
So I have personal experience with you. So I have so my dad's little dog, Shih Tzu.
Yes.
Is like young, high energy, all of that. And so Tish comes to your house and will help the owner. So it's like owner train. It's like people training with the dog.
It's at the same time. And and the reason why I find that beneficial, because training the dog is the easy part. Like for a professional and somebody with a skill set, that is truly the easy part. Relaying that information to the families
and having the family stick with it.
The family stick with it
is
and
the
follow through is the harder part.
I remember I'm texting you like, look at what the dog is doing. What do I do now? You're like, when he puts his bum on the floor, give him a treat or say yes. Give him a treat. And then the older dog that I have is just like he's got all the like the ulcer and like moving slow, and
he moves slow. You think
he moves slow. He moves
pretty fast. He's a whippersnapper.
And then when kids go to school and they're like, your kid is amazing. You're like, my kid's a pain.
Yeah.
So like at home he's just kind of like, But then he gets to your place and
he gets the running for sure.
He gets the running. I love it. So that's really great. And and I remember just the not the commands, but kind of the way that you talk to us, and left videos for us, while you were working with the dog, left videos for us so that we can go back and look at it. I found that very helpful. And so that part, people, if you need that, and what cracks me up is that I see you do the same thing like in Home Depot. You're like the dog in the shopping cart at Walmart and like all that, like training people and dogs how to be around other people. So it's not just like training in your house, but like how do you socialize dogs? So you want to talk a little bit about
well, I think we live in a different world where dogs are being welcomed into a lot of spaces. However, I see a lot of dogs that probably should not be in those spaces. Oftentimes I see a lot of dogs that are like just the other day, literally just the other day, I went to the DMV and there was a lady walking around her dachshund. No judgment, right? Because if it's hot outside and you don't have AC, I'm gonna be lenient towards the dog. But this dog did have its tail tucked tight on its abdomen, which is definitely a signal that the dog is displaying. He's communicating that he's extremely uncomfortable and extremely stressed out in this space. So it's not necessarily that I want to make sure that every dog is able to cope at the DMV, but in a real life situation, whether you're going to the park or you're going to a dog friendly area. I mean, our area has a lot of fantastic breweries, and I mean the botanical garden does certain days for dogs
after 5 or something.
So being able to take those dogs in those spaces, and I think it's very important for your dog, for the owner and the families to understand that their dog should be respectful of other people's space, right? So I'm not a fan of dogs just willingly walking up to another dog, especially on leash. The reason for that is because we have an animal that is a fight or flight animal, and we restrict their option to move away when they're on a leash, right? And so what generally happens is somebody sees another dog approach their dog and they start to grab that leash really tight and tense. And that communicates to the dog. There's something that in my sight that has caused my handler to be tight and tense. And then usually from that we get an outburst.
Because now the dog is tense because they can feel that the owner is tense.
Yeah, and also just kind of taking a dog out, right, and just saying, oh, like he'll just get used to it. He'll just get used to it. It won't. Like he will be flooded with a lot of emotions and kind of start to shut down. So we don't want that. So I do it very gradually. I never take a dog or puppy and go, you know what? We're just going to wing it and we're just going to go out to this public pet-friendly area. Point. We build up to that. So we start off doing a lot of foundational work in the house, foundational work in the yard, right? These are controlled environments. If you have a fenced-in backyard, you can control who comes in, if they're beyond wildlife, right? Same thing with your house. You have a controlled environment. And then once the dog has displayed confidence in those spaces, right? So a lot of people don't focus on the dog's confidence, but when the dog displayed confidence in those spaces, then we say, hey, you know what? Let's start practicing these skills in our neighborhood. And so once we see that confidence build up and the dog being receptive and communicating with us and we're able to understand the body language, oh, let's go to a nice quiet park on a nice quiet day, right? Before we start to increase the amount of stimuli that the dog is exposed to, because doing too much too soon is just going to work against you. And you really want to I always want to make sure, like in my mind, I want to set the dog up for success every single time. And then help the families through that process too.
So one of the warning signs you said was not a warning sign, but like that the dog is in distress is the like tucking their tail between
Yeah.
the legs. What are some other signs that we
So-
should watch out for?
The tail is probably one of your greatest indicators on how the dog is feeling emotionally. It becomes a challenge when you have a dog that does not have a tail, right? So like a Doberman may have a dock tail. A boxer may have a dock tail. Australian Shepherd, Australian cattle dog. And then you got dogs that have a corkscrew tail. So like a French bulldog, a pug. And so that makes it harder for us to read the dog. But believe it or not, it makes it harder for dogs to read the dog because a tail is, one of the biggest communicators. And so there are multiple different positions that tail would be in to indicate what's going on. Some other things that you may recognize is the positions of the ears, right? So if you've got a dog whose ears are pinned back, it depends on how far back they are, can determine what is the dog displaying. If they're relaxed, sometimes you'll see dogs' ears constantly moving and they're constantly like listening to the environment around them. I try to put myself in the skin of a dog.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think a lot of people do that. But if they did, they would pause for a minute because when a lot of times I will be outside with a client and I'll say, look, your dog is scenting. Scenting what? His nose is not on the ground. His nose is in the air.
And it's moving.
And it's moving. And a dog has over 300 million olfactory receptors. They literally will see the world with their nose as opposed to their eyes. Their eyes are secondary to their nose. A blind dog can navigate itself around the world through its nose. And so going back, the ears are another body signal. And you've got the entire body, right? So you can see piloerection, which is like with the hackles or the hair that stands up on the back of the dogs, which a lot of people always tend to think that it means that the dog is aggressive. It does not always mean that the dog is aggressive. It could, in fact, mean that the dog is over-aroused or overexcited, right? So it's important to say, okay, what is that signal? A piloerection. Okay, what's the tail doing at that time? Is it assertive? Is it standing up? Is it wagging short and fast? Or is it tucked in, right? Or what are the ears are doing? So I look at the entire dog to see what is actually going on in between the ears.
So you really have to, you said this earlier, like you really have to pay attention. Like you have to know your dog, right?
Yeah.
You have to like really pay attention. You said you need to like listen, like be still, watch your dog so that you can see like, oh, this is out of the ordinary, or this like the ears are back this far, but that's okay. Because, you just have to be like more aware. And I feel like people just like, I want to get a dog, and they get a dog, and then they just like, it's just the dog is there. The dog is not happy because they're not paying attention to the signal that the dog is giving off.
I find that a lot of times dogs are not fulfilled because they are only fulfilling what the person desires. Like the person desires a dog and wants to get the comfort, and we have all the research and data behind the benefits of us having a dog and petting a dog and everything else like that. But people do not take the time to stop and say, what does this dog need, right? Does this dog need, when you take your dog out on a walk, does he want to be directly by your side? Now, that's what most people want because they don't want the dog to pull them.
Yeah.
But that's not a walk for the dog. Is a walk for you or for the dog?
Gotcha.
Right? And so I am a big fan of teaching a dog how to walk on a loose leash where they're not pulling you, but there's an appropriate time for that. And there's also an appropriate time to ask your dog to heel, right? And I generally say when you're in tight spaces and you don't want to make somebody else uncomfortable on the street, or it's a crowded environment, maybe you're at a festival or something like that, that is different. But generally speaking, your dog is really going to benefit from a walk if you allow them to explore.
I'm so glad you said that because I live in a rural area, and we have that long street, and I walked the little dog, the Shih Tzu.
Yeah.
And he's like ahead of me and just walking and smelling and walking. And I'm always like, I can't get the dog to like stay next to me. So it's okay that
I do. I feel like it is okay. There, like I said, there is a time and a place when it's inappropriate. And when you say, okay, go ahead and have a good time and sniff, because what happens when a dog sniffs and scents, it actually releases dopamine. So there's the dopamine chemical that we experience as well. Dogs get a rush of dopamine when they're happy and when they're having fun, and they're happy and when they're having fun is when they're sniffing and they're exploring the ground. And we cannot smell 90% of what the dog can smell. I mean, we have to think of the power of a dog's nose and being able to detect sense, whether it be in an airport or
Yeah.
using a cadaver dog or whatever it is, right? They can detect our blood pressures and our diabetes and people that have like POT syndromes, and they can detect when all these things change in our body, right? And that's not that every dog is always skilled and trained for that, but they have the power and the capability.
Yeah.
So when they are out and walking, that's a great time for them to have that dopamine release, right? And then what's going to happen is you're going to come home from that walk, because a walk will never tire a dog out.
Will never tire, because you have to do the dude that runs with all the dogs on the skateboard.
I'm telling you, if we look at like, we look at every dog generally was created for a purpose, right? Humans did selective breeding, and we all created a dog for a purpose. So they have the ability to run miles. Maybe they take different breeds will take shorter sprints, and other breeds will take longer marathons. But being able to sniff is one way a dog can use its brain, right? Because most dogs are not using
they're just like at the house. Like,
they're in the house, they're on the couch, they're chasing a ball, and those are okay, right? But for a dog, what he loves to do is being able to use that nose, or do some type of activity. So one of the things that I always encourage my clients to do is, maybe you don't want to let your dog sniff on a walk. And I understand there's certain places and certain dogs where they just pick up everything off of the ground. So you can't do that. But what you can do is you can take a handful of kibble, you can just toss it out in your yard and let your dog forage for food.
That's a good idea.
Right? So this allows the dog to display some of its natural instinctual behaviors of searching for food. And most people think that dogs are hunters by nature. They're scavengers by nature. So it allows them to mimic that instinctual behavior. And when I tell you, it'll tire a dog out, because they're having to really navigate the world and identify where the scent is and where the next scent is and where the next scent is. And maybe start off small. Right. If you have a dog that's not familiar with using their nose and they don't know how to play that game, then just kind of sprinkle a few kibbles within sight. And then you start to make that game a little bit more challenging.
That's a good idea. When I take the dog, so last night I took the dogs out, and of course it's like pitch black dark, but they know what's good. They're like sniffing. I'm like, oh, there's like a rabbit around, or there's like, were there a deer hopping around, like they're all like, ugh. And yesterday Jay took off. He like ran.
I told you, he's fast.
He's
the
dog like ran, and then I saw this little rabbit like hopping around, and I was like, oh my gosh. So like it was dark, so they couldn't see. No, like we couldn't see. But they definitely, both of them were just like, they were like on it. And then all of a sudden he took off. And so that's, you're making me think about that.
Instincts just kind of kick in for a dog, right? Like they're domesticated for hundreds of thousands of years, but you can't take the DNA code out right?
Of the dog.
And so it's instinct. It just kind of kicks in, and fast moving objects. Any dog is just usually going to be drawn by that fast moving object, because their brain tells them I'm predator, you're prey,
right?
And I chase, and that's why dogs love to chase a ball, right? It's not just like the ball, it's like the chase.
It's the chase of it. Well, I was so glad I didn't get the rabbit. That was like a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So Alicia wants, when this is the question. Alicia wants to know, what breed of dog is your, she said, least favorite? What breed of, and I'm thinking like you're not gonna answer that question, but what breed of dog? We're gonna change it. What breed of dog do you just love to work with, if there is one or two? And what dogs pose a little bit of a different challenge for you?
Oh, okay. So I tell you, any dog that's motivated to learn is an easy dog, right? So whether a dog is motivated by something, and I like to help people understand this, right?
It could be food, it could be like touches.
Yeah, because a lot of times people are like, well, there's a difference between bribery and reward, but they say, he only does it for the food or the treats or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, I'm like, it's the paycheck.
Yeah,
right.
Like that's right.
You want to work for a paycheck, so
right?
Your dog wants to work for a paycheck.
Yep.
But like you said, dogs are either going to be generally motivated to learn, right? Because what we are asking a dog to do is not in their natural world.
Gotcha.
Us asking a dog to sit,
they're
like, not going to happen as natural
right.
as another dog, right? Or heel or down or stay.
Right.
In those situations, it's usually going to be, if you have a group of dogs, a family structure of dogs, it's usually going to be a situation where it's kind of like a hierarchy structure kind of situation. So dogs are either going to be motivated, what I usually find, by some level of reward, and that's going to be either food, right? And I like to actually use a dog's meal for that, as opposed to
a treat,
because then the treat, you have to increase the value and increase the value and increase the value. And there's a time and a place for that where it might be a little bit more complex.
And treats also sometimes have all kind of stuff in them.
Yeah, well, you know, I always say if you go for a treat, go for a single ingredient treat. So there's a lot of times there's great treats that are like dehydrated beef. I'd steer away from doing like liver treats, especially with the fact that pork liver has a higher amount of copper in it, which can be detrimental to the dog. And then certain breeds can't have copper, an overflow of copper at all, right? Like Dalmatians. So I'd stay away. I would just do a meat-based single ingredient treat, and it's really easy. You can make your own at home.
Okay, so go to the Facebook page before you get into the dogs that challenge you. Go to the Facebook page, because you are up there making like dog food out of, like, you're cutting up all kind of meat, like they love it. And there's a very few vegetation or produce that dogs love, but I have found that sweet potatoes, blueberries, berries, dogs absolutely love. But so there's the food, right? That's a motivator. There's a praise, that's a motivator, and then there is also play. And I find play to be a great way to connect with your dog. I go into so many homes and I see baskets of toys, and they go, "Oh, look, I got all these toys for my dog," but he won't even play with them. And that's not what he wants to do. He wants to play with you and them, right?
You know. So I always say, like, take the baskets away, leave one toy out, and that's the toy you play with your dog. And then when you finish playing with your dog, you put that toy up to build value in that toy, and then you come back and play. I have another video on my Facebook page about kind of play reward based training. So I would say, like, the most challenging breed would I would say for me personally would probably be a husky. Or those winter bred dogs, right? And a lot of that is just because they're not getting the physical activity they need.
And also they're bred to live in a different
climate. And believe it or not, they're actually very happy in a cold climate. Very happy.
All right, that makes sense. All right, another question from Chantal. Do you think most problem dogs can be rehabilitated with problem dogs in quotes? Do you think most problem dogs can be rehabilitated with proper training?
Yes, and understanding. I do. There is, however, a time and a place where I feel like, you know, if you've exhausted all options, and so you've discussed it with your vet and you've exhausted all options, this is very rare, few far in between. But for the most part, I think we have to look at it. I tend to look at dogs separate, right? Because as like a separate species. What I do with dogs, if I was an elephant trainer, I would not do with elephants. Right? What I do with dogs, I cannot do with cats, right? Because there's different species, and so there's a little bit of a different psychology. The most important thing I find to be vital when it comes to working with your dog, training or quote unquote rehabilitating a dog, is timing. A lot of times people miss out on the timing and acknowledging when the dog has done the right thing. And so a lot of times I'm like,
you're like right there.
So say, for instance, I'm working with a reactive dog, right? And we're walking and the dog does not react. They see a dog that they've reacted at, they've barked at, they've growled at, they pulled at the leash all the time. And then they don't, right? And then the person, they don't acknowledge it. Right?
But like that's the
timing is when you want to make the timing is you literally got a second, split of a second to really acknowledge that. And that's what we would call like a marker. A lot of times people will use marker word like yes, or some people will use a clicker or whatever that marker is for you, or that dog and that person, whatever they're conditioned to. So I think timing is very vital. And then just really having a plan. I work with a lot of complicated dogs and complex dogs. And it's amazing to see a dog go from, being quote unquote a dangerous dog, to that dog being able to be. I mean, I have a video of a dog, an American Pit Bull Terrier, who was very challenging, and at the sight of a dog from 200 yards away, like 2 football fields away, at the mere sight of a dog, was foaming at the mouth and reactive. To now that dog, I've got a video, and my dog and my client's dog were walking next to each other, and he doesn't even look over at my dog. He looks up at my client for direction.
Oh.
So it's absolutely possible. Some dogs take longer than others. I don't put a timeline on, I don't say, yeah, we'll fix this issue in 12 weeks or we'll fix this issue in 8 weeks or whatever the case may be. No, I go by the dog's timeline because I think that's the fairest thing to do.
Yeah. You said something on one of your videos recently, like you said something like, oh my God, I just lost it.
What did I say?
Oh, you say so much. It was along this line of thinking. Shoot. If I remember, I'll come back to it. It was somebody in the park, I think, and you said that the dog's owner, has to be the most important thing for the dog.
Yeah. So, I think so. Let's start back when somebody gets a puppy, and when somebody gets a puppy, we go, or people say, my dog has to be socialized. In our human mind, we think socialization means, hey, how are you? Let me meet you. Let me meet this person. Let me go out here. And, really a larger part of socialization is exposing a dog to new environments. Now, with that being said, when I'm working with a puppy or a dog, I ask clients to not always allow the dog to meet and greet other people or dogs, because you should be the source of the greatest love of all, right? Like Whitney needs the greatest love of all. You should be the source of all the attention and all the good things. What will tend to happen, and I see it happen time and time again, is say you have a puppy and you're going to the park, and there's two parts to this, but with a puppy, he goes out and he meets all the dogs, and there's never been an incident, but he meets all the dogs, and now he's 7 or 8 months old, and now every time he sees a dog, he becomes overly excited, right? Because he actually got a dopamine kick when he met every dog. And so his brain is now programmed, every dog is happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. So that's one side of it. The other side of that is with a puppy, an older dog will tend to correct the puppy. And the puppy might not be expecting it. He'd come up and he's happy, and his world is full of rainbows and butterflies and sugar cookies, and it's all great. And one bad interaction can really be detrimental to that puppy. So I'm actually working with a Doberman, a young Doberman, who this happened to no fault of the family. They were outside with their Doberman at 4 months old, and a neighbor's dog was off leash, and he was being playful, but she wasn't receiving it that way. And so this other dog rushed over to her, and it scared her so much that she was trying to run away, because fight or flight. So she was trying to run away, but she was on a leash, and her leg got tangled up, and she ended up with a broken leg. She's all healed now. And she's because of that trauma experience, it took us a little bit longer, because now she had to learn that other dogs were safe. And so it really dropped her, it really tanked her confidence. So we had to really work hard on really building her confidence back up and getting her comfortable. And I would bring my dog Nia out, and at the first sight of Nia, her brain goes, run away. I mean, Nia wasn't even approaching her, but her first thought was run away, run away. She still had all that. So she's doing a lot better now. And I had her out from my house for a week, and got her around a large, different group of dogs. And so she built her confidence up. So yeah, you definitely, because I always say you can add in the other component later. Right. But at the end of the day, what is your goal? Is your goal for your dog to run up to everybody, lick them, kiss them? Or is your goal for your dog to be in an environment like a park, and they're responding to you and they're ignoring everybody else, right? Or do you want your dog to ignore you? Like, that's kind of where it comes down to. But everything else, we can do play dates. We can do, proper greetings. Right? Where the dog knows how to greet a person or learns. I never do on-leash greetings, so I don't even encourage that. I don't even encourage on-leash greetings, but knows how to meet a person and things like that.
Wow. So we there's another ask her. I would definitely want to ask you about teaching. I know you teach veterinary science.
I do.
Okay. So Alicia says, ask her if she's ever trained a cat, and if so, what can you get them to do? She says her mom has a cat business.
So this is actually funny. Our daughter is also a very animal loving person. Cats are can be a little bit more complex, but I will definitely give this trophy and baton to our daughter. But she trained her cat a couple of tricks. Now she's not as quick to respond as the dogs are, right? Because it's just not an incentive for her. She's like, whatever, lady, you know. But she has taught her like high five, like you would teach a dog high five. But it's got to be definitely on her terms, and it's got to be the right reward for her, which is definitely got to be meat. But I would tell you, the chickens. When we had chickens, they were intelligent beings,
wow.
and they could easily be trained. And the great thing about chickens that I found is that chickens learn from other chickens. So it was like less work because the chickens would literally watch the other chicken and figure out how to do it. Yeah. So, but yeah, so cats are interesting species.
If anybody was at the monument, what do we do? Like the monument. Monument on Parade or something.
yeah. Maymont. No, not Maymont.
Monument.
Easter Parade.
Easter Parade. And Tish was out there with we should have brought you should have brought your dogs. I didn't know either. Next time we'll do it. We'll bring some dogs. We'll do it outside.
Right here. We'll put a chair right here.
Like little ears.
He'll be looking the microphone.
Yeah. We'll totally do that. Oh my gosh. So you had you had all the things like the tub for the dogs to play in and all the mental stimulation that they could get and everything. So so part of the training is also just kind of giving the dog mental stimulation, helping the
I call it enrichment. I call it enrichment and trying to create fun activities that you can partake with your dog, but it also provides stimulation for your dog.
Gotcha. So talk a little bit about your class.
Oh yeah, so I do which was a very cool junior veterinary science class for a homeschool group that we are part of.
I know, because I'm like running to her class. There's a snake in the class. They're doing something with some syringes. I don't know. Y'all doing all the things in there.
It's actually really cool because it really brought me back to my veterinary medicine days. And I was like, oh my God, I got a microscope and we're gonna.
I know they're doing everything in here.
I was like, hold on. Because I don't think these kids want to handle blood and poo right now. So,
oh my God!
Surprisingly, we had a group when our daughter was younger, and they did the dissections and all this other very, very.
Did y'all
cool
do like
stuff.
owl pellets didn't y'all do like a cow heart or something?
No, we did piglet. They did a piglet dissection, and it's the closest species to mimic the human anatomy. So this was also just such a great program, and I love it. I love being able to break it down by different age groups. So I would say we kind of go from kindergarten through middle school age. And so I just create different challenges. What I love about the younger groups is that it can just be so hands-on and it's so simplified. And I never really realized how valuable it is. But then when I hear the parents and they say, my kid can come home and label the parts of a jellyfish that I've never heard, or my kid is telling me we need to recycle to keep the ocean clean, or it's just, I try to go more than dogs and cats. That's one chapter, but we go down the line of different animals and species. And again, it just the summer camp I had a summer camp, a veterinary science summer camp. That was really great. Brought in the microscope and we went through anatomy and how to give injections and what is a normal temperature for a dog and a cat. And it was just really, really interactive. So I just think that, obviously hands-on learning is one of the greatest parts, greatest ways to learn for kids. And so they all loved it. And I loved it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Summer camp. There's summer camp. There's Tuesdays. If you homeschool your kids, definitely reach out. There's the Tuesday option. So we have a lot of fun.
Yeah. So definitely get in touch with Tish for Tuesdays and summers. Let's see. What is you may have done this already. Okay, well, I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So what is you may have answered this. What is the biggest misconception about dogs?
What is the biggest misconception about dogs? Well, I think people know that they're intelligent, but I don't think they know how intelligent
they are.
And I don't think they know how intelligent they are. And there's actually some new studies that are coming out where their researchers are doing MRIs on dogs to really look at their brain waves and everything in that aspect, as far as like, how does a dog feel when their person is present, and how does a dog Like, what is their brain telling us? So it's really cool that the research is digging in a little bit more about that. But generally speaking, I find that the dogs tend to outsmart the owners, and the owners struggle, and the dog's like smooth sailing.
Yeah,
like, I gotcha. I figured you out.
Yeah, like
I mean, because the dogs are great at reading body language, right? So they can read our body language. A lot of times I hear people say, oh, you know, I know my dog did something because I came home and they looked all sad in the face. No, it's not because the dog did something. It's because your body language, your apprehension, the moment you came in the driveway. Like you came into the driveway going, what did my dog do? You put the key in the door and going, oh my God, like you're a little hesitant, that little bit of hesitancy. And then when you come in, you're immediately scanning the room. Yeah. And then your dog's like, oh, what did I do wrong? You know, and it's because he's reading your entire body language from head to toe. That makes a lot of sense. Even down to your eyes, right? So if I'm working with a dog and I'm asking a dog to go from a sit to a down position, I can generally move my eyes because he's picking up on those little nuances. You would say like, don't look at him, just like wait for him to sit, and then they do it, and you're like, because you're like, sit. I would say that is probably the biggest issue most people have, is that they repeat the commands too frequently. Sit, then sit. Yeah, like say it once and stop. Say it once and stop, and let them think, because they are basically translating language in their head. All right, it's like a foreign language. When we communicate, it's a foreign language to them. They've never used those words in their world. And then a lot of times what happens is you can condition the dog that sit means that exactly that action after the 6th time you say it. Instead of the first time. Because you said it 6 times, and every time he finally did it after the 6th time, you've rewarded him. Yeah, then they're like, oh, so now the command is like, I don't know why mom's saying it. Sit. Sit. Oh, and then I finally do it and she gives me a reward. Right. So so say it once, follow through with it, you know. That makes a lot of sense. How do you stay updated in your practice, the veterinary science part and the dog training part? Yeah, so there is always evolving research. I am literally always into reading a different book, watching a different podcast. I feel like when it comes to dog training, we can learn from a lot of other trainers. There's so many different subcategories of dog. When are you going to have your own podcast? Right? I know, right? It's a good question. Definitely. You really are like should. Do people call you the dog whisperer? What do they call you? The dog lady? Yeah, I think it's dog whisperer, dog guru. You really are like amazing. Around. It's always so funny though, because I haven't, like, if I haven't seen a client and their dog particularly in 2 years, and they say, I struggle with this, and then I come in and they're like, I don't know how you did it. And it's like, it just becomes second nature. And I just say, well, you know, I think what happens is the dog understands me. Yeah. Right. And I understand the dog, and you know, we don't leave a whole lot of gaps in our communication. A lot of times there's a lot of gaps in communication. How do you, I'm thinking about all of the, like, we're in a high stress environment that's in the world, right? Like all kind of crazy stuff is happening. So how does a human, like an owner, I don't even know how to ask the question. So I know you deal with dogs who have anxiety and like they're reactive and all this stuff. And some of it's because the owner is also anxious, right? They're like, oh my God, like what happened in the news today? And so can you talk a little bit about like how you deal with like anxious dogs? Anxious dogs. Yeah. It really depends. But I will say that it definitely people play a role on that as well. So if the house is full of chaotic energy, the dog generally will also exhibit that behavior or that energy level. And so I feel like overall, as professional dog trainers, we are seeing a lot more dogs with a lot higher instances of anxiety, almost to the point where it is crippling. Oh, it's almost to the point where it's crippling. And when we look at a dog, and I always use this, because if we look at a dog in a different part of the world, right, where maybe like not westernized, right, where dogs still live outside. There's parts of the world where dogs still live outside, right, and they cope just as equally well with everything that's going on around them. They aren't so sheltered and, oh my God, he won't survive, and he can't do this and he can't do that. We're actually taking away a lot of the coping skills. We're taking away a lot of the dog's ability by trying to shelter and protect them so often. So I mean, it's definitely a twofold situation. But there are a lot of clients where I have said, you know, we've got to work on your anxiety in order to help your dog. Yeah. And there's this running joke in the dog training community where we say, people get dogs for their anxiety, and then the dog has anxiety.
Yes.
So now who's helping who?
Who's helping who?
You know, because I've seen
Oh my
perfect
God.
dogs, not perfect, but
Yeah.
like, you know, well-balanced dogs with no emotional issues that be a part of a home
Yeah.
where the individual is struggling themselves, and then now the dog struggles.
Oh my gosh. So that makes me think about my older dog, Jay. Like when he's whining, like moaning, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, Jay, stop moaning. Like, yeah. And so it's like, because I am like anxious or like on edge, the dog is like making his sounds.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, stop doing that. Like, you're driving me crazy.
Well, it just depends. And when we look at Jay, he's an older dog,
Yeah,
right?
he's older.
So
he's like hurting.
it, you know, I mean, it might be that, it, you know, geriatric dogs, senior dogs, they also have cognitive decline.
Yeah.
So it could also be a little bit of that too. So I give them a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
It
makes me like think about like how I am, like when he's bothering me, like when his behavior is bothering me, it makes me think about like, okay, let me just like do something different. Let me like take him outside, or let me like stop being like pissy about it. Let me like give him a rub down or something.
One of my favorite things to do is pop in some earbuds.
I am going to do that.
Put on your favorite podcast. I love to train like that too. If I'm not working with a client, I'm training individually, because then I don't use my voice. Right. And so I can just work with the dog, and we're kind of doing this dance, and we're doing whatever we're doing. And then also I'll sing to the dog. So I just have a lot. I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun. Listen to your favorite album. You're training your dog. You're not over communicating because you're saying the words.
You're listening to either Beyonce or Michael Jackson.
You know it. All day long. All day long.
And the last couple of minutes. Yeah. So what are the emerging trends in dog training?
That is a complex question, because the dog training community is actually pretty divided. So it is on the side of where I am, on the professional side, there's a lot of divide in the community on different techniques and what works and what doesn't work. And I find that it makes it very confusing for people, and it's very disheartening, because no matter what you think you're doing it wrong according to somebody, right? The one thing that two trainers can always agree on is that the third one is wrong.
That's like beekeeping. Everybody has a different thing.
Everybody has a different
thing.
Everybody has a different opinion. Everybody has a different thing.
Yes.
And, one trainer will tell you, you can't use treats, you're a horrible person. And another trainer, you can't do this, you're a horrible person at the end of the day.
And someone's like, use treats.
At the end of the day, everybody's just trying to help their dogs.
Yeah.
There are different approaches. I take, like, what I say is like an open-minded approach. I don't come in and start working with a dog on, we're doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G task, and we're doing it steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It's always about the dog first. What works for that dog may not work for the next dog. And now we have to get creative in our approach. So I find that over the years, I've gotten a lot more creative. I didn't do enrichment, enrichment type training 5 years ago. That's a new approach. But I have found that it is super beneficial, not only for the dog, but in the human-dog relationship, right?
That's so important. And so that's the open-mindedness, like just kind of watching to see what the dog needs. Last couple of minutes. You spoke about this a little bit earlier, that there are some benefits for adults of having dogs. We know like there are benefits for dogs having adults, but talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits for humans to have a pet companion.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research on how having a companion and a dog or cat, and even physically touching a dog or cat will lower your blood pressure, will help your heart health, help your cognitive state of mind, your emotional well-being. So there's definitely a lot of, and this is why we see dogs in therapy work. We see dogs in hospitals. Speaking of dogs in therapy work, I want to just kind of touch on a little bit the difference between working dogs. And so there are service dogs, right? And service dogs are trained to do specific tasks to help that person out. Okay. And then you have therapy dogs, which go around to hospitals and clinics and offer therapy, right? For somebody that wants to rub and pet on a dog. And then you have an emotional support animal. And so an emotional support animal is just for your emotional support. An emotional support animal and a therapy dog do not classify under the same ADA regulations as a service dog, right? And that is a big thing I do want to separate, because a lot of times people will throw a badge on their dog and they'll say it's a service dog. The amount of times I go into places and stores and grocery stores and malls, and I mean just anywhere, and I can identify that that dog is not a service dog.
Huh.
That dog is stressed. That dog is pulling on the leash. That dog's engaging. He's barking, or whatever the case may be. I strongly ask that we are respectful of what is actual a service dog. It goes a lot of thousands of hours of training for somebody, and this is a service dog aids a person, be it a seeing eye dog, a mobility service dog to help with somebody's mobility. You should not engage or interact with a service dog at all. You should not look at a service dog. You should not go, oh, that's a cute dog. You should absolutely walk past that dog and ignore, because his main purpose is to stay attentive to his handler. And so, yeah, so emotional support animals and therapy dogs are not protected under the ADA federal regulations.
Oh, wow. Wow. That gets like the whole the policy.
I'll come back.
You have to come back. You have to come back. So I'm gonna let you have the last word. I'm just gonna say I learned so much from you, like all the time, and I think this is great work. It just thrills me that you're using your passion to help yourself, help other people. It's been a great pleasure, like working with you, like knowing you, and then just like working with you to work with my dogs. Any last words you want to say?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting you say that, because I was super nervous about coming here today, but then it's like when the passion kicks in, you just talk. You just I can talk all day about dogs. Right? It's so natural. I don't have notes here. And so fluid. But yeah, you guys, if you know, I'm always here, answer any questions that you guys have. I'm locally based, but I come out to your home, and I'd be happy to help anybody who needs help for sure.
What's your number?
My phone number is 804-316-3579. Or you go.
Hey, what's your business name?
Yeah, Rise and Shine Canine, and that's riseandShineCanine.com, and you can find me there.
Yeah, well, I want to have you back to do a show on how dogs can train humans.
Oh yeah, they absolutely can, for sure.
Yes. We'll bring the dogs. She'll bring the dogs.
They can sensitive to the things we're supposed to notice.
Yeah.
You don't have to, because of the superior species.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Kind of thing for granted.
Yeah. You do, and it's super interesting. And when you talk about the early foundations of humans and dog relationship, how that even formed, it's super interesting.
Man, you got a whole research study up in there, and a podcast, and all of that. Dog human relationships.
Yeah, the early foundations.
And start kids off early, because you started off early.
Oh yeah, start your kids off early, and just start when you get a puppy. Don't wait. Start off early.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people wait and they say, "Oh, I gotta wait until 6 months," and now you've got 6 months of unwanted bad behaviors. You're kind of stuck.
Exactly.
And most dogs are relinquished to the shelter under a year old because of their behavior. So we can stop that. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
As always, we should go another hour, but we don't have it.
I'm gonna take a picture of us.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm just taking a picture. All right.
All right. Well, then, that's it for this show. Going to go on to the next show, which is also a lot of fun. Say goodbye.
Oh, we wave. Say we're supposed to wave.